We need to engage in a cultural transformation. Starting in the 1980s, for a variety of reasons, both America and many Americans became very consumption-oriented and became addicted to debt. We started running increased debt levels, whether it was good times or bad, mortgaging our future, and our savings rate started to decline at that point in time. So we need to understand that we can't just live for today, we have to take steps to create a better tomorrow. Secondly, today in Washington, a vast majority of elected officials view their position as a job and they want to make a career out of it. That's not what the Founding Fathers intended. I don't think that's healthy for our democracy, but it is where we are. And as a result, since you don't want to lose your job, you don't want to talk about tough things. You don't want to talk about the fact that, gee, we have to reform entitlement programs. We need to cut or constrain spending. We may have to have more revenues. People don't want to talk about that, but it needs to be. We've had too much laggardship from Washington and not enough leadership. And let me tell you what I mean by that. The recent rescue plan, bailout, call it whatever you want. You know, people came together in a crisis, acted, and were pounding their chest to say we demonstrated leadership. No, they didn't. They demonstrated laggardship. Leadership is when you identify a problem in advance, you take steps to capitalize on the opportunities and mitigate the risk and avoid crises. We had laggardship with regard to the mortgage-based subprime crisis. We must have leadership in order to avoid a super subprime crisis associated with the federal government's finances. There's never a good time to make tough decisions, all right? But we ultimately have to make them, or else we're going to pay a price and there'll be adverse consequences. We have to be realistic. When you're in a recession, you have to take a number of steps in order to try to get out of it as quickly as you can. And that means that our deficits are going to get worse in the short term. They're going to get worse because we're probably going to engage in some additional spending, possibly another stimulus program geared that will have more spending. And secondly, we know revenues are going to be less because of the fact that we're in a recession. But what's important is we do what we have to do to deal with the current challenge, but we learn from the factors that end up causing the current crisis, and we put in place a process that will enable us to avoid a much bigger crisis. Because believe me, if we have a super subprime crisis associated with the federal government's finances, the impact on our economy and Americans would be much worse than what we're seeing right now. We must avoid that.